Thanks everyone for joining us for this fireside discussion that the APAC Financial Wellness Initiative is hosting. And the topic today is supporting the financial wellbeing of employees. And I'll be leading this discussion. My name's Anna Perera-Shaw, and I'm the Director of the Consumer Credit Deposits Payments team at RFI Global. And this discussion is really looking at financial wellbeing, of course, as a topic that we always love to be drawing attention to, but with a specific focus on employees. And we have a great guest to talk about this today, Rebecca Maher, who is the co-founder and managing director of MoneyHappy. And I'll hand over to Rebecca to introduce herself in a bit more detail and let us know about what MoneyHappy does. And then we'll get into a bit of a discussion about the industry, what we're seeing, some of the changes, and also learning a little bit more about the journey Rebecca has gone on in setting up this organization and sort of the goals of the organization. So Rebecca, I'll hand over to you if you can let us know what you do and what you're really focused on as well.
Thanks, Anna. My name's Rebecca Maher. I'm the co-founder and managing director of MoneyHappy. MoneyHappy is an employee benefits platform that partners with organisations to support the financial well-being of their staff, their employees, their teams. And we do this via providing every employee with access to a financial coach. So we're focused on ultimately helping businesses to tackle the big issue that is financial stress and the cost to business of that every year. And we do that by working with them to identify where and how that's having the biggest impact in their organisation from a people's financial wellbeing perspective, and then working with them to deliver coaching and training education to support their staff.
And you've got this career that spans the financial services industry, and you've got experience across financial planning, coaching, and advisory. Are there any changes that you've seen in the industry, particularly in the financial wellness or literacy space, that have been potentially either influenced or accelerated by the pandemic, or any sort of key changes you've seen in recent years that are worth noting, or something that's kind of caught your eye in this space?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think there's a lot that's caught the eye of people who are working in this space. Obviously, from a wellbeing perspective or financial wellbeing perspective, through COVID, there were parts of society that had a negative impact on their financial wellbeing, through job loss or reduced working hours, and some of the other structural impacts to people's mental health and things, which also in turn had an impact on financial wellbeing. And then there were pockets of society that had a bump, if you like, or an improvement in financial wellness just through an increased savings rate. A lot of people through this hybrid work environment were able to stay at home, and that had a big impact on reducing in particular the cost of living for them. So savings really went through the roof and gave people some more certainty around what they were able to do ultimately with their finances over the short to medium term. So having said that, coming out of COVID and with the financial and economic situation that we find ourselves in today, and the uncertainty that's sort of on the horizon for the next 12, 18, 24 months, there's a lot that has been negatively impacted in terms of financial wellbeing. So, there's some statistics at the moment out that say since 2020, so in the last 2 years, financial stress has doubled in terms of the cost or the impact to business, from approximately $33 billion to now $66 billion to business, that is, based on productivity. So it's a big issue. It's gotten worse in the last 2 years, and it's something that is starting to be explored and questioned more and more by business and organisations and employees alike, looking for that extra support within and from their teams.
Yeah, that's something we've seen in the RFI Global data as well, with that particularly high levels of concern about the rising cost of living. And then for those with a home loan, that concern about their repayments increasing. It's where as of today, we've seen 7 rate rises in a row. So I think for some consumers, each month there was that anticipation of, is it going to be another one? Will it be another one? How much will it be? When will it be passed on to me? And we saw a slightly smaller increase in the cash rate last month. So I think it's something that consumers are adjusting to, but it's hard to feel that you're completely secure in your approach, because we just don't know what's happening every month. So I think particularly those with debt products, there is that greater recognition of the expenses customers have, but also the struggle to save. Because I think you're right, with COVID, you've got almost 2 segments of the market. One who were able to really build savings, they were commuting to the city less or able to work from home, save money there. And potentially they normally travel and they didn't travel, so they had a greater pool of savings, whereas another cohort who potentially lost jobs when they never would have expected it, and were in a financial situation that they just hadn't planned for. So we've been speaking quite a lot about the value of emergency savings buffers, and I think that's something that definitely came out as a clear learning in the last couple of years, that we all need to be ready in the event that we lose our jobs, for at least to be able to service debts and expenses just for at least a couple of months, which a lot of people learned the hard way. And I guess in your space, you would have seen people focusing on financial wellness, or employers potentially, as things have gotten back to normal, there's hopefully a greater recognition of financial wellness being important. Is it something that you're seeing, are you seeing greater attention post-pandemic on this, do you think, or is it in line with what you saw 2019 and earlier?
I would say, and there's some really interesting research that's just been released in the last couple of days, actually, by WageStream in association with the Financial Action Inclusion Plan Association. So their research has actually sort of highlighted that there's still a massive disconnect between what employers and leadership think around the provision and support that's already available to employees with respect to financial well-being versus what employees feel that is available in terms of support around financial well-being from their employer. So 58% of HR professionals, according to this research, believe that there are supports available in this area of well-being, versus 36% of employees who feel as though that same support exists. So there's a disconnect of roughly, nearly 20%. When you extrapolate that out to a global sort of scale, there is research from Deloitte recently which highlighted the fact that, the perceptions of the C-suite and leadership of global companies, their perception of the help and support that's available to employees and how well they are supporting their employees from a financial wellbeing perspective sits at around 86% believing that they are doing a good job, versus a similar 30-ish% of employees globally who feel the same about that same level of support internally within their organizations. So it gets worse as you go globally, just based on sheer sizes of population size and data, as you know. But it raises an interesting question, really, from in this sort of area and with our industry, is why does this disconnect exist? And what are the beliefs and perceptions from organizations' perspectives? What is it that they deem is support, and how is it that that support is being communicated, versus what is the support that people need, who are the employees of these teams? And is it a matter of they not understanding where to get support, or is it actually a matter of the supports that are there are not meeting the needs and stresses of the employees? To answer the question about whether I feel as though it's becoming more of a priority in organizations, it's becoming more of a focus in terms of an information gathering exercise, and I'm trying to understand what is financial wellbeing, how does it fit within the business's HR or people strategy, what business goals is it designed to support outside of the obvious, which are well-being of our people. And what I mean by that is, how does it support mental health, which it's proven to do so in the literature? How does it support our talent attraction goals? How does it support our retention and turnover reduction goals? And how does it support our goals or desire to improve the productivity and the promotion of high performance and high performing teams within the organization? Because financial well-being does influence those goals and objectives at a business level. And in fact, in the US and the UK, it's used as a strategic lever to do those things or to support the business as a whole. So here in Australia, my experience in talking with employers is that we're at the beginning of understanding that relationship, right, at an organizational level. I think it's clear that providing financial well-being supports an individual's overall well-being, supports the whole person that comes to work, coming to work to earn an income, utilizing that income to be able to afford the things that we want and need in life to, just not just survive, but to thrive in our own life and the things that we want to pursue and do. That connection's clear and well-researched. The connection to how it affects our mental health is clear and well-researched in the literature. But building the business case is something that is still coming to life within organizations at the moment. So the conversations are there, and it's an important part of the next generation of work and supporting the well-being of teams within organizations going forward.
An interesting point about just how big that disconnect is between the support that executives think is available versus what employees perceive to be available. And you made a good point about it may depend on what support is needed or what they're thinking of in terms of support, which I think is, there's always merit in, employee feedback and perspective being considered, just to really think about and be reminded of what it's like to be at the employee level, outside of the executive team, to really assess what are they thinking, what do they need specifically. And that, I think that data just shows there's a real need to align the two and reduce that gap, so that if there's any uncertainty or grey area about what wellbeing tools are on offer, then that needs to be addressed, and presumably shouldn't be too challenging to address with clear information, and I guess even just speaking to employees to find out what their needs are and how that could be addressed.
Yeah, I think some of that comes down to an understanding about financial well-being in the context of employee benefits and health. So, going back a decade or more, 2 decades, or to date, really, financial well-being within organizations has largely come down to offering of, superannuation products, and then some superannuation education, and then maybe some salary sacrifice partnerships and some salary sacrifice education. But when we look at the research today around what financial well-being needs are of the employees within the organizations that we're talking about, the key issues or the key drivers, and this has come out in a lot of research, but most recently ANP's financial wellness survey, it comes down to a dissatisfaction with their current financial situation and practical difficulties of meeting monthly expenses. So, those issues are those drivers for employees. You can't respond to those needs with superannuation advice or superannuation products, or with salary sacrifice arrangements, for example. So if there's a perception that by having those things, purely those things on offer to employees, that you've sort of met the needs of their, you've met their financial well-being needs, then there's a disconnect right there. The ability to help people navigate their short-term finances, their cost of living concerns, their, dissatisfaction with their current financial situation, really the only way to address that is through coaching, through a one-to-one sort of conversation around, well, what is the dissatisfaction? Where does that come from? Where does that stem from in the individual's position? And to what degree is it a response to just a mismanagement maybe, or a lack of optimization around the management of finances versus some kind of internal thought process, or or feeling, how they think and feel about money. So being able to offer employees coaching, will coach people through that that dissatisfaction, and eliminate the anxiety, the worry, the stress around those short-term cost of living issues. There's going to continue to be ultimately a disconnect there between what employers consider to be a financial wellbeing support that they offer and what employees are needing or looking for in terms of the support that their organizations are providing them. So I think understanding what is wanted and needed and where the stress and anxiety sits versus what leadership considers to be a traditional financial wellbeing solution or initiative, that can go some of the way, if not a large part of the way, to explaining, I think, where this disconnect lies.
Yeah, definitely. I think the understanding of what is needed is really critical, and you've sort of segued into one of my questions that I wanted to ask around sort of what MoneyHappy does to support financial wellness. And I was curious to know about, so on your website it says you don't sell products, rather you solve problems. And I was interested in this point about the problems and what problems you're aiming to address. And I feel like you've covered that a little bit with that management of anxiety and stress when it comes to money management. But are there any other sort of problems that you feel are really crucial to being addressed or really addressable with financial wellbeing support?
Yeah, I think, in terms of the problems that we face, we solve rather, we work on two fronts from a problem solving perspective. As an organization who focuses on this issue of financial stress and financial well-being, ultimately, two different sides of the coin. We say financial stress exists in the workforce in perpetuity to some extent, because finances are part of our lives. They're, how we feel and think about finances ebbs and flows, and there will be periods through our lives where stress is a result not just of things, a mismanagement or some kind of personal failing, but from external factors beyond our control. So from an organization's perspective, you can't really entirely resolve financial stress as an issue, but you can manage it and be proactive about that. So from a financial well-being perspective, we think of it as a continuum when it comes to employees. There's financial stress, de-stress, and chaos, in people's lives at one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end, there's harmony and financial satisfaction, which sort of is momentary as well, or transitional. And then there's everything in between. So we are focused on solving, in partnership with the business, the impact, the financial cost of financial stress within their employees to their business and bottom line every year. And then on the individual side, in improving financial well-being for the individual, for their teams, so that person has the ability to show up and be productive, happy, and contribute to the organization in the way that they want to, but might be prevented from doing to the extent they want to because of this issue that they're dealing with at that particular period of time. So, I mentioned before, the cost of financial stress has doubled in the last 2 years. We're talking about $66 billion now is the estimated economic-wide cost of financial stress to business. And that's based just on the lost productivity through presenteeism. So, people not being able to perform at their best when it comes to their job and, their ability to proactively engage and be creative, think through problems, to go out and seek business. And then on the work, from the worst possible impact, it has the ability to increase, workplace accident and illness injury rates because of not necessarily productivity, but through a clouded mind and things like that. So helping business to sort of look at that issue and say, well, that's at an economic level. What does that look like at a business level? We can make that same, we can follow that same theory and calculation to kind of look at the impact at an organizational level as well, based on research around these productivity and stress sort of issues. So then from an individual's perspective, I mean, we know what it is that is causing the stress from an individual's perspective. That's also very well established in the literature. And we use a framework of looking at, financial well-being for the individual through present and future choice and financial security. So, how can we address those things in the short term, and then how can we address those things over the medium to long term? And we do that in partnership with the business through financial coaching and continued education that supports that sort of behaviour change in their teams over the medium and longer term.
Do you think organisations know about the productivity decline, or in that sort of the impact? I mean, what I'm getting at is, do you think that at a baseline, employers are aware of the fact that financial stress comes at a cost to their business, or is that something that when you're explaining it to them, they, it's kind of a light bulb moment?
Yeah, it's more of a light bulb moment. I think we all know that, intuitively that makes sense, right? That if you're preoccupied or you're stressed about money and worried about your finances, you're absent, you're present but absent. Presenteeism defined. So now the statistics around that are, approximately 20% of employees are prevented from working productively due to financial stress in the workforce at present. And over the course of 1 to 2 months, each employee, and this is from A&P's study, spends up to around 11 hours a month dealing with financial stress and concerns at work. So, I mean, depending on what research report you look at, you can get any array of hours consumed, work, spent preoccupied with personal finances. But anywhere from 2 hours a week to 12 hours a month is somewhere in the realm of what's been studied and reported on. But when we, I think the issue for, that presents for employers sort of like having an aha moment about that is that realistically, it's still quite a silent problem, in the workplace. Money is still very much taboo. People don't like to talk about it, to discuss it. There is stigma around financial stress. And, from a societal and cultural perspective, we sort of view personal financial success as a result of our personal attributes, intelligence, ability to go out and get. And then the opposite is true too, that, a personal, financial stress or problems is a result of a personal failing somehow. So because of that general sort of perspective, there is this issue around openly discussing, seeking help, and feeling as though the people that we might, and the resources that we might reach out to, also share that perception about it being a personal success or failure. So for that reason, people don't tend to talk about it openly in the workforce. So, we have a lot of organizations also sometimes, and this is just because people work within organizations and people have these perceptions that, certain people have needs and other people don't, based on potentially their income, how much they earn, where they live, how old they are, what their net worth might be. Lots of different factors, people sort of filters they apply to, or who would have financial well-being need and who wouldn't. And so that too prevents it from being something that might be discussed in organizations that even work in particular industries, or that work or amongst employees of a certain age group. So there's, I think, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that from an employer's perspective, it's understood that intuitively we know and accept that people go through periods of financial stress and strain, and that this has an impact on them as an individual. To what extent that actually impacts the organization, I think that is still misunderstood. And I think it's actually quite a significant impact to explain, but it's well researched across individual productivity, mental health, talent attraction, retention, and all of those things, do have a flow-on effect in terms of revenue, business, growth, and culture, people experience and culture within a business. So still very much an aha moment, but lots of really great research that's coming out now around financial well-being and, who does have a need, and to try and get rid of some of these myths around those things.
I think that's something that I've been thinking about, particularly in the last couple of years, is the value of open discussions about money. And it's something that sounds so simple, but it's, culturally embedded in us and society as well, that we just don't speak freely about money. I know I've made the comparison in other conversations before about, when you've got a friend who's really getting into fitness and they're doing a great job, and you think, instead of being happy for them, you're kind of thinking, well, I'm not doing that. We impose things on ourselves. And, you made the point about the personal failing of, I don't want to bring up financial stress because people will think that I've done something to give this, to make this happen for me, or they'll think that I'm just bad at managing money, or they'll think I'm not smart, or they'll think I'm this and this. And, the judgments that we make, and, to be fair to people can be quite judgmental. So it's kind of this, how do you make it more comfortable to be able to discuss finances more openly? Because there's a lot of opportunity to knowledge share and make it a little bit easier for people to know what tools that could be beneficial for them or what worked well for them. But it's, one of the big barriers is being able to seek help or ask the question, or even know that help's available. So that's always something that I think is, maybe there's opportunity for younger generations to be more comfortable talking about money. I know there's been quite a lot of discussion globally about making, salaries disclosed in a clearer way, so there's more transparency around what people are even earning, and if people are getting what they actually feel is fair, or what their peers are getting. And there's, of course, conversation about gender pay gaps as well, but there's I think a growing movement to a bit more transparency, rather than the old sort of more traditional approach of don't speak about money, it's rude. But it's I can really see the value of an organization sort of having at least options available for their staff to seek out a bit of help, or a service that can help them learn some practical skills. And you mentioned financial coaching, which I think is an interesting strategy, particularly when thinking about getting that tailored advice, rather than running a seminar and just hoping that people turn up and engage with the content. It's kind of that one-on-one personalization, which I imagine can be quite effective. Do you find that coaching is a tool that employees are engaging with and seeking value or gaining value from, particularly given it's that one-on-one environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with just based off our own research from the feedback and the numbers that we've done on looking at engagement and participation, and just the qualitative feedback as well. I mean, it's people want help from people ultimately. I think sometimes when we look to solve problems, we in the 21st century, we look at everything through, well, how can we make it scalable, and how can we make it fast and speedy, and how can we make this a tech solution. I mean, sometimes when it comes to the really personal parts of our world, we removing the human to human contact altogether, it removes some of the impact, or most of the impact as well in some instances. So I think that's one of the most valuable parts of coaching, is that, you know, in an hour session, you can have a life-changing experience for someone that has a flow-on effect to the way they think and feel about money for years to come. I mean, that's been my experience with coaching into financial planning, for example, you know, which is my background. You know, people, when they're looking to get ahead financially, strategy is an important part of that. You know, what to do, how to do it, where to do it, using what tools is part of that equation. But being able to change and develop a framework for how you think and feel about your money throughout life, as you make decisions day to day, as things change about your circumstances, financially or otherwise, that has a very empowering impact on people. You know, giving people agency over their lives through building financial capability and confidence has an enormous impact on their well-being. And there is an important piece of that is sort of the longer term, you know, to create behavioral change. So any way that you can incorporate, you know, a longer term financial support, as opposed to just this event style initiatives or interactions, has a really big impact on behavioral change as well. So that's where coaching really has the ability to move the needle on financial well-being for individuals. I mean, when we go back to, and I mentioned it before, the key things that, again, through the research coming out around where is this poor financial well-being come from? What's driving it? What are the issues or the influences? It's dissatisfaction with their current financial situation. So there isn't really a way for an app or a workshop or, you know, a one-off interaction or a tool without some kind of deeper connection and someone to facilitate understanding where, looking through the filter or the nuances of that individual's world, is that coming from, and how can we rearrange, you know, reframe, transform, put better systems and processes in place to help that individual completely change that outcome, you know, for their life, ultimately. So I think that's a really important thing for people to understand is the power of coaching has the ability to not only move the needle in sort of an event style format or through that very short interaction, but also create a much deeper understanding and improvement and outlook on that person's finances for, you know, years to come.
I can see that the flow-on effect is really positive as well. Even as you mentioned, you know, in a 1 hour conversation, you can have a really profound change. And I think sometimes one of the key things that really helps is when people just better understand their situation, just knowing, you know, how much money they have coming in and out, how much debt they have, even the opportunity to reduce their debt faster than they realize can be really helpful, because it can be really daunting to look at your bank balance and look at your credit cards. But if you just know that if you contribute an extra X amount per month, you'll reduce your debt in, you know, 3 years earlier than you expected, or, you know, whatever the change might be, it seems to have this effect that can actually really help with that almost optimism about the finances, or reduce that negative sentiment. Because I think for some customers or consumers, it's easier to just not look at the numbers and just hope for the best because it's stressful. But this seems to be something that, you know, it's that first step towards confronting where they're at and then getting a bit of tailored support to actually move forward and kind of know what steps to take, or just having that person guide them a little bit, you know. Especially having a conversation with a real person one-on-one makes a difference.
Yeah. You know, coming off the back of COVID and the burnout, you know, the prevalence of burnout in the workforce at the moment as well, there's some literature now that's coming out that sort of says, well, you know, where the position that employees find themselves in is called a hot state, of financial well-being, which means they're sort of in this decision paralysis about what to do or where to go. They're sort of just like existing and moving along. So information in and of itself, and we know this from it's time immemorial, even before all of these things have happened and unfolded in our world, like COVID and burnout, that information alone doesn't actually help, isn't what's necessarily going to change someone's, current financial situation. And the easiest way to describe it is to sort of look at the health and diet and exercise comparison and say, well, there are millions of articles, blogs, videos, programs, apps, etc., to help people get in shape and get people fit, to lose 5 kilos, etc. And it's all just there, for anyone to access, watch the answers, and it all boils down to exactly the same thing. But what prevents us from actually looking at it and getting on track, and taking that first step, and then staying on track, and then keeping on track, and then changing our whole sort of mental framework around the issue from a performance improvement perspective, is the absence of a human, someone else to sort of facilitate that fresh start. And that's what a personal trainer does for most people. It kicks them into gear, it gives them a reason to turn up. It gives them a reason to lean in and reach for support. It gives them a reason to stick with the short-term battle that is habit and behavioral change, that then becomes, a better way, a sustainable better way for addressing, your health, your fitness, your finances, ultimately, in this case. And that's the role of a financial coach, is really to do the same thing for people's finances. There are many things that prevent people from taking that first step. Sometimes it's access, it's inaccessible. Sometimes it's cost. Sometimes it's, their own thoughts and feelings. Sometimes it's a lack of trust. And all of these things can be overcome in the context of employee and employer financial coaching. So, there's trust there between the employer and employee, that they've done due diligence and looked at these partners and said, well, these are reputable people, they're qualified, regulated, licensed, etc. So there's a trust relationship through the employee-employer trust relationship. So we remove that barrier for that person getting help. When we look at accessibility and cost, if it's there and promoted as an important part of a person's individual well-being, and it's there when they need it, it's available. Not everybody needs these things all the time, but knowing they're there has a very powerful impact on well-being as well. It reduces that uncertainty and insecurity about, well, what would I do in this instance, or where could I go, or who should I turn to? And not everybody wants to ask their peer network or their colleagues about, well, who do you use as a financial advisor, or where did you go to get this help, if they were to do it independently? Because again, they might want to engage in that process confidentially. And that's, another reason that making things available, or it's another reason that employers have a really great role to play in helping individuals in their teams and in helping solve this issue for themselves as an organization.
I can definitely see the value in just knowing it's there, and then even if it takes a bit of time to, to sort of know it's there, and then eventually kind of make the decision to book in the one-on-one. I can see how that, just knowing it's on offer, just plants the seed of opportunity, which is just really positive. And I guess one more thing that would be good to find out from you, or two final questions probably, would be, firstly, what you see as some of the key achievements for MoneyHappy, or you and yourself in building this organization and really in leading it and driving the success of it, but also any goals that you have for the next period of time, whether it's 12 months or 5 years or 10 years, something that you found to be a key achievement, and what you're looking forward to for the future, or key goals that are coming up for you and MoneyHappy.
Yeah, great questions. I think when it comes to what we do at MoneyHappy, one of what I consider to be, a key achievement comes back to just the impact that we have on individuals. So it's visible, it's tangible, I mean, sometimes with different solutions where, again, they're tech-based, there can be a lead time to getting that feedback, to seeing the needle moved on the issue and solving the problem. When you work in this business, and your business is helping and coaching, the impact that you have is instantaneous on the person. So it's rewarding. It's incredibly rewarding as a job, as a career, as a profession, and then as a business owner that delivers that support within a business. In terms of goals for the organization, I think one of our goals is really to help the industry be seen as the value add, or the bigger part that it has and should play in, a business's employee value proposition, in their want to, drive social impact and social and cultural change, or societal change as well. Sometimes I think we take a very limited view of something that's new and sort of say, well, what is this, how is this of benefit to me? It's a product, do we need it, etc. And that's, it has its place within the organization in solving those problems. But it also has a massive flow-on effect from a societal perspective. And that's really, I guess, one of the key drivers or goals of MoneyHappy, outside of helping solve issues for individuals and our clients, but is seeing the impact that it can have more broadly speaking. So in areas like mental health. So yes, we draw the alignment to improvements in mental health via the people within their organizations. But I mean, that has a flow-on effect at a societal level, to the relationships those people have, the work that they can go on to produce, the ideas that they may be able to come up with. Yeah, and the list goes on, without being, going down a particular road. But I mean, there is lots of research about, how women retire with less money. I mean, the incidence of domestic violence in the relationship that, finances and the lack of financial independence has on the frequency and occurrences of those kinds of tragedies. So where we can support financial independence, building financial capabilities and confidence, and helping people to, reach, understand that their financial well-being is important. It's a constant that, it's always there, it ebbs and flows, but giving them access to support, that's primary goal is to see them successful and happy, is one of our goals, as a business. It is our mission ultimately as a business.
And that's such an important point to finish on. I think financial independence is inherently valuable, and it's something that we really should be focusing on a lot, and it should be front of mind for as many organizations and people and policymakers as possible. And I think this is something that the positive flow-on effect to financial well-being, helping to support financial resilience, financial capability, as a toolkit to enable that resilience, can be so valuable. And I think it's exciting to see, the opportunity, and also, of course, to talk to someone who's just as passionate about financial wellness as I am. So I'm really glad to speak to you today, and really appreciate all the perspective that you've provided, particularly on the state of the market and the opportunities that employee-specific support the role that can play in society, but also even just from a business perspective, thinking about how that can actually really help an organization to be successful and have employees that are performing at a level that is in line with what they'd be looking for, in line with what the employee would like to be, the level they like to be performing at as well, and just sort of informing that more holistic change longer term, and hopefully when you think about the younger consumers as well, or younger employees who can potentially set the foundation with some really good skills and perspective that can help them manage finances longer term. So it's been great talking to you. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully our listeners find this as interesting as I did. I'm sure they will. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me.